Sarah Williams walked into Mount Sinai Hospital on a bright Monday morning, just like she had done for the past 3 years as a nurse in the rehabilitation ward. Her colorful scrubs and warm smile always brought life to the otherwise plain hospital corridors. At 32, she was known among her colleagues for her gentle touch and endless patience with patients. That morning started like any other, with Sarah checking her patient list for the day. But fate had different plans when she noticed a new name on her schedule: Michael Anderson, room 407, admitted after a serious car accident 2 days ago. When Sarah entered room 407, she found a handsome man in his mid-30s sitting in a wheelchair, staring out the window. The morning sunlight touched his strong features, highlighting the sad look in his dark brown eyes. Michael had been a successful architect before the accident that damaged his spine, leaving him unable to walk. "Good morning, Mr. Anderson," Sarah said with her usual cheerful voice. "I'm Sarah, and I'll be your nurse during your stay with us." Michael turned his wheelchair slowly to face her. For a moment, he seemed surprised, his eyes taking in Sarah's appearance, her dark skin glowing with health, her braided hair neatly tied back, and her kind eyes that held no pity, only warmth. "Please call me Michael," he replied with a small smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "And thank you, Sarah." Over the next few days, Sarah noticed something special about Michael. Unlike many patients who let depression take over after such accidents, he worked hard during his therapy sessions. Even when he was tired or in pain, he never complained. Instead, he often asked Sarah about her day, genuinely interested in her stories about other patients or her life outside the hospital. What touched Sarah most was Michael's creativity. Despite being unable to draw on his usual architect's drafting table, he started sketching building designs on a tablet, using a special stylus when his hands were tired. He showed Sarah his ideas for making buildings more accessible, inspired by his new perspective from the wheelchair. "You see this ramp design?" he explained one afternoon, his eyes lighting up with excitement. "Most architects make them too steep, but now I understand how important the right angle is." Sarah found herself looking forward to her shifts when Michael was on her rounds. They shared lunch breaks when she could spare the time, talking about everything from their favorite books to their dreams for the future. Michael told her about growing up in a small town, working his way through architecture school, and building his own firm. Sarah shared stories about her close-knit family, her journey through nursing school, and her love for helping others. But life wasn't always smooth. Sarah noticed the looks some people gave them when they were together. Some confused, others disapproving. Even some of her coworkers made comments about her spending too much time with Michael, yet neither of them let these reactions bother them. One rainy evening, as Sarah was helping Michael with his evening medications, he asked her a question that changed everything. "Sarah, would you have dinner with me once I'm discharged? Not as a nurse and patient, but as friends?" Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. She knew it wasn't common for nurses to date former patients, but something about Michael was different. He didn't see her as just a nurse, and she had long stopped seeing him as just a patient. "I'd like that," she answered honestly, watching his face light up with the first real smile she'd seen since his accident. That evening, as Sarah drove home through the rain, she thought about how life works in mysterious ways. She had always believed that love comes when you least expect it, but she never imagined finding it in room 407 of her hospital. Whether Michael was in a wheelchair or not didn't matter to her. What mattered was the connection they shared, the way he made her laugh, and how he saw the world with hope despite his challenges. Little did Sarah know that this was just the beginning of a love story that would not only change their lives but also inspire many others to look beyond physical disabilities and racial differences to find true love. 2 weeks after Michael left the hospital, Sarah sat nervously at a table in the Garden Cafe, a small restaurant known for its accessible design. She had changed her outfit 3 times before settling on a simple blue dress that her sister said brought out the warmth in her dark skin. Her hands fidgeted with the menu as she waited. The sound of wheels on the wooden floor made her look up. There was Michael, dressed in a crisp white shirt and dark pants, navigating his wheelchair smoothly between the tables. Sarah's heart skipped a beat when she saw the bouquet of yellow roses in his lap. Her favorite flowers, something she had mentioned only once during their hospital conversations. "You remembered," she said softly as he handed her the flowers. "I remember everything you tell me, Sarah," Michael replied with a warm smile, "including how you take your coffee, 2 sugars, no cream. Their dinner conversation flowed naturally, just like it had in the hospital. But this time, there were no interruptions from other patients or medical emergencies. Michael told her about his progress with physical therapy and his new project, designing affordable, accessible housing for people with disabilities. The accident changed how I see architecture, he explained, his eyes bright with passion. Every building should welcome everyone, regardless of their abilities. Sarah listened, amazed by his determination to turn his challenge into an opportunity to help others. She shared stories about her family, her protective older brothers, her supportive parents, and her grandmother who raised her to be strong and independent. But reality soon tested their growing connection. As they left the restaurant, an elderly couple stared disapprovingly at them. Sarah felt Michael tense up beside her. "Does it bother you?" he asked quietly. "The way people look at us? Not just because I'm in a wheelchair, but because I'm black and you're white?" Sarah finished his sentence. She stopped walking and turned to face him. "Michael, my grandmother taught me that love doesn't see color or ability. It sees the heart, and your heart is what drew me to you." Michael reached for her hand, and for a moment, the world around them disappeared. But their peaceful bubble burst when Sarah's phone rang. It was her mother, calling to remind her about the family dinner the next day. Would you like to meet my family?" Sarah asked suddenly, surprising herself with her boldness. "They're having Sunday dinner tomorrow." Michael's eyes widened. Meeting the family was a big step, especially so soon, but he saw the hope in Sarah's eyes and knew he couldn't say no. "I'd be honored," he replied, though she could hear the nervousness in his voice. The next day, Sarah's family home buzzed with activity. Her mother had cooked extra dishes, her father had cleared space in the driveway for easy wheelchair access, and her brothers tried to act casual while secretly watching Michael's every move. Grandma Rose, however, surprised everyone. She walked straight up to Michael, looked him in the eyes, and said, "So you're the young man who made my Sarah smile again. Welcome to the family, child." Those simple words broke the ice. Soon, Michael was helping Sarah's youngest brother with his architecture homework, discussing business strategies with her father, and even learning her mother's secret recipe for sweet potato pie. As Sarah watched Michael charm her family, she realized something important. Love wasn't just about finding the right person. It was about finding someone who made you want to be a better person. Michael's disability hadn't made him bitter. Instead, it had given him a deeper understanding of life's challenges and the importance of breaking down barriers, both physical and social. Later that evening, as they sat on the porch swing, Michael had smoothly transferred from his wheelchair with practiced ease. Sarah rested her head on his shoulder. The sound of her family's laughter drifted through the open windows, mixing with the crickets' evening song. "Thank you," Michael whispered. "For what?" "For seeing me, not my wheelchair. For being brave enough to love me despite what others might think." Sarah smiled, knowing that this was just the beginning of their journey together. There would be challenges ahead, but they would face them hand in hand, breaking down barriers and changing perceptions, one day at a time. 3 months into their relationship, Sarah and Michael faced their first real test. Michael's parents were flying in from Seattle to meet Sarah. Unlike her welcoming family, Michael's parents had been oddly quiet when he told them about Sarah. Their only response was a short message saying they needed to discuss some things in person. The day of their arrival, Michael waited at his newly renovated apartment, which he had specifically designed to be wheelchair-friendly. Sarah stood beside him, wearing a conservative dress and trying to calm her nerves by reorganizing the fruit bowl for the third time. "They're going to love you," Michael said, though Sarah noticed his hands gripping his wheelchair's armrests tightly. The doorbell rang exactly at noon. Michael's parents, Richard and Helen Anderson, walked in looking exactly like their pictures, tall, well-dressed, and wearing perfectly polite but distant smiles. "Michael, darling," his mother said, hugging him while his father stood back, examining the apartment's modifications with a frown. "Mom, Dad, this is Sarah," Michael said proudly, reaching for Sarah's hand. The silence that followed was heavy. Helen's smile became fixed, while Richard cleared his throat uncomfortably. "So, you're a nurse?" Helen finally asked, her tone making it sound more like an accusation than a question. "Yes, Mrs. Anderson, I work in rehabilitation at Mount Sinai," Sarah answered confidently, remembering her grandmother's words about standing tall in difficult moments. And that's where you met our son. While he was vulnerable after his accident, Richard's voice was sharp. Michael's face reddened. Dad, stop it. Sarah helped me recover not just physically, but emotionally. She showed me life wasn't over because of my wheelchair. We're just concerned, honey, Helen said quickly. With your condition, you need someone who, well, someone who understands our kind of lifestyle. Sarah felt her heart sink as she understood what Helen meant by our kind of lifestyle. It wasn't just about wealth or social status, it was about race. But before anyone could speak, Sarah's phone buzzed. It was a video call from one of her patients, a young girl named Lucy who was learning to walk again after an accident. Sarah excused herself to take the call in the kitchen. Sarah, Lucy's excited voice filled the screen. Look what I did today. The video showed Lucy taking her first steps with her new prosthetic leg. Sarah's genuine joy and the expert way she encouraged Lucy caught the Andersons' attention. They watched from the doorway as she spoke to the child about physical therapy exercises and promised to bring her favorite stickers during tomorrow's session. When the call ended, Helen's face had softened. You really care about your patients, she said, her tone different now. I care about people, Mrs. Anderson, Sarah replied honestly. Your son taught me that everyone deserves to be seen for who they are, not what they look like or what challenges they face. Richard stepped forward, looking at his son. You've changed, Michael. You're stronger now, more focused. Is this your influence? He asked Sarah. No, Mr. Anderson. This is who Michael always was. Sometimes it takes a challenge to reveal our true strength. The tension in the room began to fade. Helen asked about Sarah's work with children, while Richard and Michael discussed the accessible housing project. By evening, when Sarah served her mother's recipe for dinner, a week after the dinner with Michael's parents, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about his unfinished question. Every time she tried to bring it up, something interrupted them: emergency calls from the hospital, meetings with clients for Michael's accessible housing project, or visits from family members. One busy morning at the hospital, Sarah worked with her young patient Lucy, who was making amazing progress with her new prosthetic leg. As Lucy practiced walking, she asked an unexpected question. Is Mr. Michael going to be your husband? He looks at you the way my daddy looks at my mommy. Sarah smiled, helping Lucy balance. I don't know, sweetie. Sometimes life surprises us. He should ask you in a special way, Lucy declared with the wisdom of a 7-year-old, with flowers and music and everything. Little did Sarah know that at that very moment, Michael was meeting with her grandmother, Rose, at her small house on the other side of town. He had navigated his wheelchair up the ramp that Sarah's brothers had built for Rose last summer. I want to marry your granddaughter, Michael said straight away, his hands folded in his lap, and I need your blessing. Rose studied him carefully while pouring him a cup of her famous sweet tea. Marriage isn't easy, child, especially for two people who will face judgment from both sides. Are you ready for that battle? Michael sat up straighter in his wheelchair. Mrs. Rose, every morning I wake up and face a battle just to get through my day. But Sarah makes those battles worth fighting. She doesn't complete me. She inspires me to complete myself. Rose's face broke into a warm smile. That's exactly what I needed to hear. Now, let me tell you about Sarah's favorite spot in the city. 3 days later, Sarah received a mysterious text from Michael asking her to meet him at the botanical gardens after her shift. She remembered telling him months ago that the gardens were her favorite place in the city. She used to come here with her grandmother to watch the sunset. When she arrived, she found a trail of yellow rose petals leading to the garden's central gazebo. Following them, she saw Lucy standing at the beginning of the path, wearing a pretty dress and holding a sign that read, "Follow the Love." Several of her former patients were spaced along the path, each holding a photo of Sarah and Michael from their time together. Her heart beating fast, Sarah walked the path until she reached the gazebo. There was Michael, looking handsome in a blue suit, his wheelchair decorated with tiny lights that sparkled in the evening sun. Behind him stood both their families, her parents and brothers, his parents who had flown in from Seattle, and Grandma Rose wearing the biggest smile Sarah had ever seen. Sarah, Michael began, his voice full of emotion. They say life doesn't give you anything you can't handle. My accident taught me that was true, but meeting you taught me something even more important. Life sometimes gives you more than you ever dreamed possible. He moved his wheelchair forward and took her hand. You never saw my disability as a barrier. You helped me see that love doesn't need perfect circumstances to be perfect itself. Then, with practiced movement, Michael reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. One of Sarah's brothers stepped forward to help steady him as he opened the box, revealing a beautiful ring with a yellow diamond, the color of the roses she loved so much. Sarah Williams, will you marry me? Will you build a life with me, face all our challenges together, and show the world that love knows no boundaries? Tears rolled down Sarah's cheeks as she looked at the man before her, at their families standing together, at little Lucy bouncing excitedly in the background. She saw not a man in a wheelchair, but the person who had shown her what true strength and love really meant. Yes, she whispered, then louder, yes. As Michael slipped the ring on her finger, their families burst into applause. Helen Anderson was crying and hugging Rose, while both fathers shook hands. Sarah's brothers were cheering, and Lucy was throwing rose petals everywhere. But Sarah and Michael barely noticed any of it. In that moment, they were lost in each other's eyes, knowing that while their journey wouldn't always be easy, they would face it together. What they didn't know was that the biggest surprise of their lives was still to come. Wedding planning brought both joy and challenges for Sarah and Michael. They wanted their ceremony to be perfect, not just for themselves, but to show everyone that love could overcome any obstacle. However, 3 months before the wedding, something unexpected happened that would change their lives forever. It started during one of Michael's regular physical therapy sessions. His therapist, Dr. Thompson, noticed something unusual while working with his legs. Michael, can you feel this? Dr. Thompson asked, pressing a point on his left foot. Michael's eyes widened. Yes, I can. It's faint, but I can feel pressure. Dr. Thompson ran more tests, trying to contain his excitement. I need to schedule some immediate scans. This could be significant. When Michael called Sarah at the hospital, his voice shook with emotion. Sarah, can you come to the rehabilitation center? There's something you need to see. Sarah rushed over during her lunch break, still wearing her nurse's scrubs. She found Michael with Dr. Thompson and 2 other specialists, all wearing expressions of cautious optimism. We've detected some nerve regeneration, Dr. Thompson explained, showing them the scan results. It's unusual this long after the accident, but not impossible. With intensive therapy, there's a chance, a small one, that Michael might regain some movement in his legs. Sarah, with her medical background, understood the gravity of this news. She also understood not to raise hopes too high. What are the next steps? She asked professionally, though her hand trembled as she held Michael's. We'd like to start an aggressive therapy program, Dr. Thompson said. But she should know, it's going to be demanding, painful, and there's no guarantee of success. Michael squeezed Sarah's hand. When can we start? The next few weeks became a whirlwind of activity. Between wedding preparations and Michael's intensive therapy sessions, they barely had time to breathe. Sarah rearranged her hospital shifts to help with Michael's exercises, while Michael pushed himself harder than ever before. Some days brought progress, a slight toe movement, a muscle twitch. Other days brought pain and frustration, leaving Michael exhausted and discouraged. But Sarah never let him give up. Remember what you told me when we first met, she would say during particularly hard moments. That challenges are just opportunities in disguise. Their families rallied around them. Sarah's brothers helped modify Michael's exercise equipment at home. His parents hired the best specialists to consult on his case. Grandma Rose kept their spirits up with her wisdom and famous sweet potato pies. One evening, as they sat in Michael's apartment reviewing wedding details, he shared something that had been on his mind. I don't want to tell anyone else about the therapy, he said quietly. Not until we know more. Sarah understood immediately. You don't want to create expectations. Exactly. And, he paused, looking uncertain for the first time since she'd known him. I need you to know that I'm not doing this because I think I need to walk to be whole. You taught me that I'm complete exactly as I am. Sarah moved to sit beside him, taking his face in her hands. I know that, Michael. But it's okay to hope, to try. Whatever happens, we're in this together. They decided to keep the therapy sessions private, sharing the information only with their immediate families. The wedding preparations continued as planned, with Sarah and Michael choosing a venue that was fully accessible and beautiful. Little Lucy, now stronger on her prosthetic leg, was thrilled to be chosen as the flower girl. She often visited during Michael's therapy sessions, her own journey inspiring him on tough days. "See, Mr. Michael," she would say, demonstrating her walking progress. "If I can do it, you can too." As the wedding day grew closer, Michael's therapy began showing more promising signs. But he kept his progress carefully hidden, wearing looser pants to disguise the small but growing muscle definition in his legs. He had a plan, one that would give Sarah the surprise of her life on their wedding day. What he didn't know was that Sarah also had a secret, one she had discovered just days ago. She was waiting for the perfect moment to share news that would make their happiness complete. 1 month before the wedding, Sarah sat in the hospital's break room, staring at the small ultrasound picture in her hands. The doctor's words still rang in her ears. "Congratulations, you're 8 weeks pregnant." She hadn't planned to find out this way. A routine checkup had revealed the unexpected blessing. Sarah had been feeling tired lately, but she blamed it on the stress of wedding planning and helping with Michael's therapy. Now everything made sense. She touched her stomach gently, wondering how to share the news with Michael. That evening, Michael had his own excitement to share. During his therapy session, he had managed to stand for almost 30 seconds with minimal support. It wasn't walking, but it was more progress than anyone had expected. "Sarah, you should have seen Dr. Thompson's face," Michael said as she entered his apartment. He was sitting in his wheelchair, but she could see the triumph in his eyes. "He thinks I might be able to." He stopped when he saw Sarah's expression. "What's wrong? Are you feeling okay? You've been looking pale lately." Sarah sat down across from him, her hands shaking slightly as she reached into her purse. "Michael, I have something to tell you. Something wonderful, but unexpected." She handed him the ultrasound picture. Michael looked confused for a moment, then his eyes widened in understanding. Are we? "We're going to have a baby," Sarah whispered. "I'm 8 weeks pregnant." Michael stared at the small black and white image, tears forming in his eyes. With trembling hands, he placed the picture on his lap and wheeled himself closer to Sarah. "A baby?" His voice cracked with emotion. "We're going to be parents?" Sarah nodded, tears running down her cheeks. "Are you happy?" Instead of answering, Michael pulled her onto his lap, holding her close. "Happy doesn't begin to describe it. This is everything." They sat together for a long time, talking about their future, their fears, and their dreams. Michael shared his worries about being a father in a wheelchair, while Sarah expressed her concerns about working in the hospital while pregnant. "Should we tell everyone before the wedding?" Sarah asked. Michael thought for a moment. "Let's wait. I want us to have this joy to ourselves for a little while. Plus," he smiled mysteriously, "I have a surprise planned for our wedding day that I don't want to overshadow." The next few weeks passed in a blur of wedding preparations and secret joy. Sarah's morning sickness made planning challenging, but she managed to hide it well. Michael continued his therapy with renewed determination, thinking about being able to play with their child. Their families noticed something was different. Grandma Rose kept giving Sarah knowing looks, while Helen Anderson commented on Sarah's special glow. But everyone was too busy with wedding preparations to probe too deeply. Lucy, during her final therapy session before the wedding, noticed Sarah's quasiness. "Are you sick, Miss Sarah?" "No, sweetie," Sarah smiled. "Sometimes good things can make you feel a little sick. Like when I'm excited about Christmas and get butterflies in my stomach?" Lucy asked innocently. "Exactly like that," Sarah laughed, sharing a meaningful look with Michael. 1 week before the wedding, Sarah and Michael visited Dr. Thompson for a checkup. Michael's progress had exceeded all expectations, though he still couldn't walk independently. The doctor cleared him for their surprise wedding day plan, with proper support and precautions. That night, as they sat on Michael's balcony under the stars, Sarah rested her head on his shoulder. "Can you believe how much our lives have changed in 1 year?" Michael placed his hand gently on her stomach, where their tiny secret was growing. "From the moment I met you, I knew my life would never be the same. But this, you, the baby, the progress with my legs, it's more than I ever dared to dream." "Sometimes the best dreams are the ones we never knew we had," Sarah replied softly. As they sat together, planning their future, Neither could have imagined the chain of events that would unfold on their wedding day, events that would make their story one that people would talk about for years to come. The day before the wedding arrived with bright sunshine and nervous excitement. Sarah stood in her mother's house, watching as her wedding dress was carefully hung on the door. The elegant white gown had been specially designed to look beautiful whether she was standing or sitting beside Michael's wheelchair. "Something's different about you," Grandma Rose said, entering the room with a cup of ginger tea. She had been bringing Sarah this tea every morning, with a knowing smile but never asking directly about the pregnancy. "I'm just happy, Grandma," Sarah replied, accepting the tea gratefully. Her morning sickness had been stronger lately, though excitement for tomorrow helped her forget the discomfort. Meanwhile, across town, Michael was having his final therapy session with Dr. Thompson. His legs had grown stronger over the past months, though few people knew about his progress. His father, Richard, watched from the doorway as Michael practiced standing with support bars. "Son," Richard said, his voice thick with emotion, "I owe you and Sarah an apology. When you first told me about her, I was worried about all the wrong things. I didn't see what an amazing person she is, or how much stronger you've become since meeting her." Michael smiled at his father while carefully lowering himself back into his wheelchair. "Love sees what others can't, Dad. Sarah taught me that." That evening, both families gathered at the church for the wedding rehearsal. Lucy, proud in her flower girl dress, practiced walking down the aisle, carefully dropping rose petals. "Is this good, Mr. Michael?" she called out. "Perfect, Lucy," Michael answered, watching her from his position at the altar. His heart raced thinking about tomorrow's surprise. Sarah's brothers had been helping with special preparations, secretly installing support bars hidden behind the altar's flower arrangements. Everything had to be perfect for what Michael had planned. After the rehearsal dinner, against tradition, Sarah and Michael met privately in the church garden. They had decided some moments were too important to wait. "I have something for our baby," Michael said softly, pulling out a small box. Inside was a tiny silver rattle, engraved with tomorrow's date. "I want our child to know that on the day we became a family officially, they were already in our hearts." Sarah wiped happy tears from her eyes. "The baby's not even here yet, and you're already the most wonderful father." They sat together in the quiet garden, Michael in his wheelchair and Sarah perched on a nearby bench. The evening air was filled with the scent of roses, yellow ones, of course, which decorated the entire church. "Are you nervous about tomorrow?" Sarah asked, knowing about his planned surprise. "Only about one thing," Michael replied, taking her hand. "I need you to promise me something. No matter what happens tomorrow with my surprise, whether it works or not, promise me you'll remember that I'm marrying you because you make me feel complete exactly as I am." Sarah squeezed his hand. "I fell in love with you, Michael, not with what you can or can't do. Tomorrow will be perfect simply because we'll be together." As they said goodnight, Sarah's mother appeared to whisk her away for the traditional night before the wedding. "No more seeing each other until tomorrow," she insisted cheerfully. That night, neither Sarah nor Michael slept much. In her childhood bedroom, Sarah lay awake, one hand resting on her stomach where their tiny secret grew. She thought about how far they had come from that first meeting in hospital room 407. In his apartment, Michael went through his exercises one final time, determined to make tomorrow special. His wheelchair sat beside his bed, faithful companion through his hardest days, but tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow would show everyone that love and determination could make miracles happen. Around midnight, both their phones lit up with a text from Lucy. "Don't be nervous. Tomorrow will be the best day ever." They smiled, miles apart but thinking the same thing. Lucy was right. Tomorrow would be more amazing than anyone could imagine, not because of any surprise or hidden talent, but because it would mark the beginning of their life together, as husband and wife, as parents-to-be, as proof that love knows no boundaries. The wedding day dawned bright and beautiful. The church filled with guests, yellow roses decorated every corner, and excitement filled the air. Michael waited at the altar in his wheelchair, looking handsome in his black tuxedo. His heart pounded with anticipation, not just for seeing Sarah, but for the surprise he had planned. Behind the scenes, Sarah stood in the bridal room, wearing her gorgeous white dress that flowed like a gentle waterfall. Her father waited by the door, tears in his eyes as he looked at his daughter. "Ready to shock everyone?" he whispered. Sarah nodded, touching her stomach gently. She and Michael had decided to announce their pregnancy during the ceremony. The music started, and Lucy began her walk down the aisle, spreading yellow rose petals. She gave Michael a special wink as she passed. She was one of the few who knew about his surprise. Then the wedding march began. Everyone stood as the doors opened, revealing Sarah on her father's arm. Michael caught his breath at the sight of her. She was absolutely beautiful, her dark skin glowing with joy and the special radiance of early pregnancy that only a few had noticed. As Sarah reached the altar, she noticed something different. Hidden among the flowers were the support bars they had secretly installed. Her heart skipped a beat, knowing what Michael planned to do. The minister began the ceremony, speaking about love that overcomes all obstacles. When it came time for their vows, Michael surprised everyone by pressing a button on his wheelchair. Two poles quietly rose from behind the flower arrangements. "Sarah," Michael said, his voice strong and clear, "before I say my vows, I want to show you and everyone here what love and determination can do." With careful movements, Michael placed his hands on the poles. Dr. Thompson stepped forward from the front row, standing ready to help if needed. Then, slowly but surely, Michael began to rise from his wheelchair. Gasps filled the church as Michael stood, supported by the poles but definitely standing on his own 2 feet. Sarah's hands flew to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Even though she had known about his progress, seeing him stand here now was overwhelming. "I stand before you today," Michael said, his voice shaking with emotion, "to show that with love, anything is possible. But Sarah, my love, you taught me that I was whole even before I could stand. You loved me not in spite of my wheelchair, but including it as part of who I am." Sarah stepped closer to him, holding his hands to help him balance. "And I have a surprise for you too," she said, her voice carrying through the silent church. "In about 7 months, we're going to need that wheelchair for midnight walks with our baby." Now it was Michael's turn to look shocked. The church erupted in joy and tears. Both sets of parents were crying, Grandma Rose was nodding with satisfaction, and Lucy was jumping up and down with excitement. They exchanged their rings and vows, Michael remaining standing with Sarah's support. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Michael pulled Sarah close for their first kiss as a married couple, their first kiss with them standing. But the surprises weren't over. As they turned to face their guests, now officially Mr. and Mrs. Anderson, Michael took a small step forward, then another. With Sarah holding his arm and Dr. Thompson nearby, they walked together down the aisle. They didn't make it all the way. Michael needed his wheelchair again halfway down. But it didn't matter. They had shown everyone that love doesn't see limitations, only possibilities. At the reception, Lucy danced around their table, telling anyone who would listen, "See? I told you it would be the best day ever." Later that evening, as Sarah and Michael shared their first dance, him in his wheelchair, her perched on his lap, they knew their story would inspire others. It wasn't just about a man learning to stand or take a few steps. It wasn't just about a baby on the way. It was about 2 people who saw past their differences to find perfect love. "What do you think the future holds?" Sarah whispered as they danced. Michael placed his hand gently on her stomach, smiled, and said, "More miracles, my love. Always more miracles."